Welcome back, viewers, and for those who've just joined us, we are looking at the prophecy about forced amnesty delivered by Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa. And before the break, it was getting hot in here in the studio as we discussed about the economic perils that have led to the construction of a bigger prison. Gentlemen, we notice further that the Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa then pulled aside on the 22nd of August 2015. And in a discipleship class, he was speaking to the disciples only. And he then went further to expand and give a clearer view of the vision that he had. And it's interesting to note for me that he spoke about there being a bigger prison. And not only that, but he saw water gushing out from the center of the South African prison. And this water was like a river. Maybe I'm now saying too much. There's already so much more to say about that. The gushing of the water out from the center, it's a gushing, it's a forceful expansion, explosion of water. And he said it looked like sewer.
Yeah. Man of God, when he drew a smaller group, at first I wondered why. But I then realized, man of God, maybe the reason why he had to separate a few.
Yeah.
Just like what was happening in the Bible.
Yes.
Where Jesus would give to the multitudes in parables. But in a smaller group with his disciples, he would then give the details of the parables. And when he gave the prophecies, first on the 1st of January 2015, and second on the 9th of August 2015, that was in the public domain. And it was taken through the various means of media that we have. And people had already begun to comment. But he chose then the disciples. And he said, today I want to explain to you what I meant about that prophecy.
Yes.
And I want to give you the details of the prophecy because people are already commenting about it and they are saying it's obvious that because of the way the economy of Zimbabwe is going, crime rate is going to increase and people eventually are going to find themselves in prison. Then he said, it's not like that. I'm not deducting. It's not like an obvious thing. And then he went further. And I liked it when he took the disciples like they were in a real class.
Yes.
He was now writing on the board,
Yes.
explaining every detail about the prophecy, man of God.
He even said, let me give you a better picture.
Yes, yes.
Let me give you a better picture.
Yeah.
While this you are saying people were commenting, I think we need to address this, Pastor, Brother Simba. People don't just comment, and I found it to be a serious problem with people. They actually enjoy commenting on matters that they don't understand. I don't know whether it's because of acquiring educational papers or the other way, that people are not doing it the right way. But look, when a prophet is giving a prophecy, he will not give you all the details. It's not like he will tell you everything that God has told him. He will always summarize the prophet. So he's saying, let me give you a better picture, because people were commenting bad about the initial prophecy that was given on the 9th of August 2015. Remember, this was like the height of the job losses wave that hit Zimbabwe when a Supreme Court granted employers that they can dismiss people from their jobs. And Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa is saying it's not an obvious thing, because people then, some of these comments, if we had time, we could go through some of them on the internet. They are everywhere. Some were saying it's obvious because people are being fired from work. So what else are they going to do? Right? And that was not correct, because in any case, he said because of where this economy is going, meaning the South African economy, not the Zimbabwean economy. You see, so it must be taken as a principle, like what Pastor Keta said, that people must seek clarification. People need to seek clarification. I can just give another example. Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa gave a prophecy about oil during the judgment night, that historic event. And then he actually said he is seeing another place, all right? Which means the one he was talking about was a different one. I mean, if we just try to be very, very realistic, if people don't understand, they must just ask to say, can you elaborate or show us where this oil is? Because some of the comments, again, we're now saying there's been a project done in the Zambezi, of which he actually said, I'm seeing something being done along a big river. Which other big river do we have if it's not the Zambezi? Yeah, which means people don't understand. And this was exactly the same thing again, which was happening with this particular prophecy. People don't seek to understand or to inquire from the prophet himself to give more light. But he's coming and saying, let me give you a better picture. Hence the use of the board and the marker to really draw diagrams so that we could understand. Yes.
And I find it interesting because he starts off by saying, I'm not going to make this a parable, but I'm going to be very clear. And I find it interesting because the Lord Jesus himself used parables until his disciples said to him, Lord Jesus, you're using parables. And the Lord says, it's given to you to understand the secrets of the kingdom. And I think one of the reasons why the world cannot accept, or the government does not hear and understand some of these prophecies, is because they're not given to understand. And sometimes I think us as the children of God, we are given to understand those principles. But what then makes the prophet remarkable is that he says, it's not a parable. Yeah. I'm going to make this as clear as possible. Yeah. Yeah. Black and white, no grays. Yeah. And he went and he explained and he broke it down and he broke it down. One point that we had failed to discuss earlier on was the man of God gave a prophecy in a prophecy. As he was prophesying about the need to build a bigger prison, he spoke about the economic situation. He says, because of where this economy is going, there's going to be a need to build a bigger prison. And then in this tape, he then goes further to say this economic situation is actually the economic situation in South Africa. And we see that in South Africa, in 2015, it hit a record high inflation, and the US to Rand equation hit 16.84. That was the exchange rate, the highest ever recorded. Yes. I mean, that was an incredible prophecy in itself. Yeah. If economists had taken heed, maybe things could have turned around. Sure. But it's amazing how the man of God can prophesy in a prophecy, and people can even miss it.
Man of God, I think in that discipleship class that you just led us to discuss about, where you was now explaining the prophecy in detail, to me, it brought another level of understanding how this man, the prophet of God, Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa, operates. There is a statement that he said. He said, I was in prayer for 20 minutes, and suddenly I was caught up in a revelation. That on its own, we need to understand. Yes. Very few of us dare to pray for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Some even go the whole day without prayer. And the man of God is actually drawing the disciples to an understanding that these things are not coming as a result of reading any any book, or is coming, or internet or anything. This is coming from prayer. If there is any lesson that we can draw as a people, we need to understand that the moment we devote ourselves to prayer, God begins to speak. And that's exactly what he said. 20 minutes into prayer, and all of a sudden, he was caught up in a revelation and taken to a certain place. Now, this is no longer in the physical, because if we were to get into his prayer closet, we were going to find him physically. But spiritually, he was transported, he was moved by God, which means, like you said, my brother, prophets or a prophet is a spirit. He's not limited by the physical boundaries.
Never.
And he was taken to South Africa. And then he said something very profound, man of God, that I saw something like a forced amnesty.
Yes.
I saw something like a forced amnesty.
Yes.
And I said to myself, what is this now? Forced amnesty. Has it ever happened
Yeah.
that people can be forced to pardon? And that's exactly what then transpired. That's exactly what then happened.
Shocking.
When the South African government then said, because of the situation, the economic meltdown that we are experiencing, we need to take drastic measures and make sure that we cut our garment according to our cloth and reduce our expenditure. And the first line of call was to deal with the prisoners. And guess who? Zimbabwean prisoners.
Yeah.
And they were released, not because they had served their full sentence. Before they even served their full sentence, they were released. That's the first amnesty.
Allow me to request that we talk about this, Brother Simba. Pastor Keda is mentioning a very powerful point. The man of God, Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa, is saying, I then saw. He's not getting it from anybody. He then saw something like forced amnesty. And I don't really know where these skeptics get it from, but let's look at this clearly. Yes. Where was it written? Then
Yeah.
did
Something
the
like that
South
will happen.
African government
Yeah.
have a document to say we are going to do this in 2015? Did they know that the economy was going to take a nosedive? Did they know at one particular point all the functions of the economy are going to be comatose? They didn't know. Is it possible for Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa to influence South African government officials to preempt this particular strategy? Never.
Man of God.
Is there a Zimbabwean government official who knew that they were going to receive prisoners? If they are there, can they come out? And then they tell us about it. This is, it's serious accuracy, man of God. It's totally unheard of. And you can now see that his source of information is not man. Like you rightly said, it's not the internet. It's not even other prophets or men of God, because they could have said it themselves. But it shows that with Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa, his source of information is God. That's it.
I think
because
therefore,
he saw, he didn't hear, but he saw, which means he actually witnessed the whole scenario, and the source thereof was God himself.
Man of God, I think therefore what it means is it becomes very dangerous for people to comment negatively on what they don't know.
Yes.
Like I said earlier on, this man of God was in prayer. This is 20 minutes. And he's telling us clearly that God took him.
Yes.
And they visited a place.
Yes.
Now, to me, what it means is this man is ever praying for nations. And maybe as he was praying for nations, then Zimbabwe came across. Then South Africa came across. And we don't even know how many other nations came across him. And probably these are prophecies that are going to come if he has not given them already. And we cannot afford to speak against the voice of God in the manner that people are doing now.
Yes.
Because what he is receiving after travailing in prayer. He's receiving after seeking the face of God. Yes. So we need to understand that when a man of God of this magnitude, of this stature, like Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa speaks, He is not speaking for entertainment.
Yeah.
He is not speaking for joy. He is speaking because he's hearing from God.
Yes.
So that's all I can say. Like you are saying, Pastor,
Yeah.
people need to understand. We don't need to take the men of God for granted.
We need to
Sure.
understand.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to understand.
And I watched on the video when he was drawing the countries. If you notice, when he drew the South African prison, the circle was bigger. Did you notice? The circle was bigger than the Zimbabwean one.
Yes.
And then he starts off and he draws S prison, South African prison. And then he draws a smaller circle to show that the South African prison has more prisoners
Yes, which is very
than the Zimbabwean prison. And what's then interesting to note, he says from its center,
yeah.
it started gushing.
Yeah.
Gushing is violent.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you previously stated, how can a man of God interfere with government policies of another country?
Yes.
He was not there, but he saw.
He saw.
He was caught up in a revelation, and he saw a decision they had not even made yet.
Yes.
A decision they had not even sat down to talk about.
Yeah.
He saw it, and there was a gush, and this gush signifying an impromptu,
Yeah.
a powerful,
Exactly.
a forceful decision that was made on the part of South Africa
Yes. Yes.
to release prisoners,
Yeah.
Zimbabwean prisoners, from their system.
Exactly.
And it said that water came out from the center.
It's not just water, man of God. He said it's like a sewer.
Something like a sewer
Yes.
problem.
It's dirty water that is gushing out. And I said to myself, sewer, water at the center of the South African prison. What could this be?
Yeah.
And later on, that's when he then explained the parable. That the water that he's talking about, the sewer that he's talking about, which is not clean, these are the prisoners
Yeah.
that were going to come out. You know?
Yeah.
When he spoke about it, at first I thought, well, maybe something else that we are going to hear him talking about. He was referring to the prisoners that are going to be brought out of those prisons and flushed out of the system. Flushed out of the system.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even if you look at the way he said it, Prophet Manyama Kandua said, I'm seeing something like a sewer problem. Just looking at it, a sewer problem is very undesirable. It's hazardous. Right? And even now, as we know what has happened because of the release of these prisoners, you really understand now that he was hearing from God. Because it's uncontained. You know, just like having habitual, unrepentant criminals roaming freely in a peaceful society like Zimbabwe. You know, remember he said it will be like a flood. I'm seeing a river flowing, and he was pointing with both hands like this. You know, if something is done using both hands, there's emphasis. He's pointing at the direction of the flow, and also the force with which the flow will carry away people with it. And a flood, it's water, basically.
Sewage-like flood
Yeah.
coming to our nation.
Yes. Water is very good. Water is life. Water is everything that we desire. But when it's a flood, you don't mess around with it. You have to flee.
Yes.
And this is exactly what is happening. He's saying something like a flood. And just imagine how many prophecies did he mention by giving all these things? Sewer problem, gushing out, like you mentioned, Brother Simba, and now like a river flowing, and now a flood. All these are prophecies telling you exactly the nature of the problem that the Zimbabwean government was going to experience.
Man of God, when he mentioned about a flood, and I also realized that he was referring to the kind of movement of the Zimbabwean prisoners coming out of South Africa, because he said, I saw the water flowing like a river.
Yes.
That movement on its own. To me, as I saw it, I realized, oh, this is not just like a once-off thing.
Yeah.
A river flows.
Rivers flow, definitely.
They flow. And when he said a river, it's not a once-off kind of deportation.
Yes.
It's a continuous release. It's a continuous pardoning of Zimbabwean prisoners from South Africa coming to Zimbabwe. So at first when I saw, as the prophecy was being fulfilled, I heard like in our local newspapers, they were saying 140 prisoners have been released.
Yes.
Then I said, okay, so 140 really, do we really need a bigger prison for 140? But as it turns out, these prisoners are being released almost on a weekly basis. Only that some of the figures are not coming through, but we have confirmations from various online newspapers that are saying, that are reporting.
This is actually happening today.
It's happening like now.
It's
still happening like now. Prisoners are being released. It's a river that is continuously flowing into our nation.
And this river, he says, at its point of entry into the Zimbabwe prison, it will begin to overflow, to spill out. Not a river with clear water, a river with sewage-like water. It will overflow. And you could even show by the streaks that he made on the board, up and down. And he said it's going to flow into the streets. That means these individuals, these murderers and killers that he mentioned, some of them who've killed 20, maybe 30 even people.
But I've got a question. Why, if you imagine, why would a whole government plan to manage this scenario? That's one of the things that people must understand.
Yes.
Because it's contained in the prophecy. Because you were talking about gushing out, which means the nation of Zimbabwe was going to be caught unawares without preparing for this. That's the only way it would become a flood, because you can't contain it. We have seen floods in Mozambique, neighboring countries, even locally here in Zimbabwe, in Mzarabani and other areas. At times, the Civil Protection Unit would have to send helicopters to rescue people.
Yes.
And all heads of cattle, at times, they are destroyed because you are caught unawares. You actually celebrating that it's raining, but what you are not aware of is that the rains are bringing with it a flood that you cannot prepare to work against. The nation of Zimbabwe was caught unawares. And why would then the government of another country plan to release prisoners in a continuous, quiet flow like a river? Because at times I have seen this happening. Many people, they would want to benefit from the prophetic, but they don't want to testify that this is exactly what the prophetic has done for me in my life. They don't want that. All they want is to benefit. Once they benefit, then they just do it quietly. And to be very frank, I think all our viewers, they have to know that this is a form of blasphemy. Because even in the Bible, you read all the synoptic gospels, they will tell you that Jesus Christ did this and that, or he said this and that, just as it was prophesied by the prophet of God, either Isaiah or another prophet. Because it's a principle. You have to refer to the prophet. You have to mention the prophetic when what it has told you is coming to pass. So this situation whereby it's done Nicodemously, it's not a good situation. If I receive a prophetic word, I must be able to say, just as the man of God, Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa, prophesied to me on such and such a date, this is it. This is exactly what has happened to me.
Yes.
We must not be quiet about it, but we must be shouting about it on top of mountains.
Man of God, sorry, I just want to make this point clear. There is something that you mentioned when you spoke about how he drew
Yes.
the two nations. South Africa was bigger, Zimbabwe was smaller.
Yes.
And there is something that he did when he was now explaining the flow of that flood or the sewer
Yes.
in Zimbabwe getting into the streets. You saw he was almost like covering the whole small circle,
Yes.
which means these prisoners are never going to be in a particular place in Zimbabwe. It's going to be all over. He said this. He saw the sewer flowing in the streets. So it's almost nationwide. If you take a closer look on how he was drawing, it was the streaks were almost covering the whole part of Zimbabwe. It's a gushing covering the whole nation.
The whole nation.
The whole nation of Zimbabwe. So as it is, like what my brother was saying, as it is, we are at a point where we need to be very, very careful, even as a nation, with how we treat prophecy, because we ignore it. But the prophecy being prophecy, and from what I have seen from Prophet Makandiwa, it will become clear. Yes. Those streaks on their own, they are so apparent, even on the picture, that it will be clear even to the ordinary eye that there is sewer in the streets. You don't need to be told.
Yeah.
It will be smelling.
Yes.
You just know there is sewer in the streets.
Yes.
So no matter what amount of hiding, and wherever you try to hide it, it will never be hidden. It will be smelling. So this problem is with us and will be with us. And we will not be able to hide it. The prophet made it clear. Sewer is in the streets.
You know what just came to me now?
Yeah.
That image of the flood coming up and the prisoners floating on top of the water.
Yeah.
When you're in a position of floating, you don't have a lot of control. And what's interesting now is the river is flowing. So you are floating on top of a river that is flowing. It wasn't their decision.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't sit down and say, you know what, we want to go home.
There was a force.
A flow that was pushing them and exerting them from behind, from where they were, South Africa.
Because it was a forced thing.
It was a forced thing coming to Zimbabwe, and they were floating, just floating on top.
I really pray that everyone who is interested in the prophetic will be very much blessed to have such insights like you are showing. But just imagine that on that board,
Yes.
there are more than 4 or 5 prophecies within one sentence, because he's drawing the South African prison bigger than the Zimbabwean prison.
Yes.
He's saying something there.
That's prophetic.
He's drawing an arrow to show the movement. He's telling you it's the South African prison. That's a prophecy. If he just draws a circle and leaves it there, you can't tell whether he wants to talk about football or what. But he's telling you that this is South Africa. And there's the flow, the direction, right, of the sewer into a Zimbabwean prison. That's another prophecy. And he's telling you that the Zimbabwean authorities cannot contain the situation. That's another prophecy. You are not going to contain this. No matter how loud you are, or you are not going to contain this.
That's
It's a
why I
prophecy.
love this panel, because we are sitting here and we are discussing and we're beginning to see that
Exactly.
this prophecy in itself is pregnant.
Yes.
It's pregnant with much more of the prophetic.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Man of God.
It
Amazing.
says, into the Zimbabwean prison, and then he's saying they can't contain it. And I'm seeing this water getting into the streets. He's also telling you exactly where the problem will be found. Pinpoint in the streets. If we now check with even our law enforcement agents, much of these shocking criminal activities are being done in the streets. Yes.
Yeah.
People are made that when maybe they are walking home, they are doing that in the streets. And here the man of God, Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa, is giving another prophecy. It will flow into the streets of Zimbabwe. All those are very sharp, accurate prophecies that he is giving. And I'm amazed, people of God, to say maybe many people might hear God talking, but when you have a spiritual expert like Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa, it lies in the ability to interpret the voice of God. That ability is what makes him outstanding.
This discussion keeps getting better and better and better. But gentlemen, let's take a short break. We'll be right back.